Greetings. This is the commentary for the song On the Water. I wrote this on February 11th, 1983. With a date that specific, I'm sure it just came together with one sitting. Sometimes my songs will come in one shot, and I know when I'm writing and that I'm creating something on the spot. Other times I have an idea and I've got to work with it. Sometimes the chorus will come. There's no formula for this. It just the way that I look at music and music writing, it's a gift from God that no one can really conjure up. You've got to expose yourself to the medium, and perhaps you have an idea for something, but when it comes together, there's a magic to it that you just don't have any control over. Anyway, this song, of course, is Jesus walking on the water and coming to the disciples, and if you read the entire passage, Jesus had sent them ahead of him. So they were on the water and the storms come, and then Jesus came to them in the fourth watch of the night, and he was walking upon the sea. The fourth watch of the night, I want to say it's 3 to... I'm not sure what the times are, I'll have to look that up, but it had been very early in the morning. But he came walking on the sea, and they were frightened, and of course they said it's a phantom or a ghost. And they cried out for fear. They cried out terrified as they saw him walking on the water. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, "Take courage, I am." That's the word ego eimi, I am. And that would be a designation, of course, for God himself. With Moses in the burning bush, Moses said, "Who should I say that you are?" He says, "You say, I am." And in fact, when Jesus was adjured by God to say if he was the Christ or not, in Luke, Jesus said, "I am." And there was another point with the Pharisees even before that. He said, "Before Abraham was born, I am." And they picked up stones to stone him because he, being a man, was making himself out to be God. So this, to say "I am," the Jews understood that as a declaration and designation reserved to the Creator. And Jesus making that claim is a claim of being God in the flesh. Well, Peter said, if you're the I am, command to me that I come to thee on the water. And Jesus said, "Come." And Peter did come out. He got out of the boat and he's walking on the water. And he came towards Jesus, and then I throw in there, on that stormy sea of Galilee. But seeing the wind, and really it'd be seeing the results of the wind. You don't see the wind, but you can say, "I saw the wind come through," and it's an expression where you're seeing the results of the wind. He became frightened and began to sink, and cried out, saying, "Lord, save me. I'm sinking in the water." A lot of people have commented on this, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on telling you some big speech, which you probably already know, about stepping out in faith and not looking at the storms around you, etc. And if you can do that, I would say more power to you. In this instance, Peter was not crying out, "Lord, save me from my sins." He's crying out, "Lord, save me from immediate and impending danger." And the Lord reached out, took hold of him, and did save him. We don't have to be told to call to the Lord to save us. It's an automatic thing we do when we're in trouble. And of course, if somebody's in trouble, it's even an atheist, that's where their atheism falls away. That old saying, "No atheists in the foxhole." But immediately Jesus stretched out his hand, took hold of him, and said, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt on the water?" We would do ourselves a great favor to think about the characteristics of the God of the Bible. What this book is saying is that our Creator has always been. He's never had a beginning. He's always known everything. And he cannot lie. Not only he will not lie, but he cannot lie. It's impossible for him to lie, we're told in Hebrews. So he says he has existed forever. And there's a place in Isaiah that is what I call a haunting phrase. He's talking about, "I'm the one and only God. There is no other God besides me." And there's a little phrase that says, "I know of none." And when I read that, I remember it just gave me a haunting feeling as though God searched. If that's the proper way to even put it, if there may be another God. The point I'm trying to get to, I've said this probably before also, but I don't know if I came up with this or if I heard it, but if you can believe the first verse of the Bible, you'll have no problem with any of the miracles in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Then we're told later in the New Testament that he spoke it into existence. In fact, that might even be in the Psalms. He spoke and it stood fast. But it says he created it out of nothing. And if we would think about this God who we are serving and who is on our side, because our sins are pardoned and now we're his son or daughter, and if we could keep that in the forefront of our mind, when we walk into things, we would not doubt or be those of little faith. So God help us to grow in our faith, not in a fabricated myth, but in the faith of knowing who he is, what he has said, what his promises are, and being able to just function in that without having what's around us divert our eyes and cause us to stumble. Well, of course, now Peter, I also say at this point the Holy Spirit didn't live in him, so he was at a disadvantage that you and I shouldn't have. Well, then he got into the boat and the wind stopped, and those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, "Truly, this is the Son of God. Even the seas and the winds obey him." And we saw him walking on the water. Yes, walking on the water. I was in a Bible college for 1 year before I went on to a couple seminaries. And that was my first introduction to the academics of Christianity. In theological circles, there's what's called higher criticism and lower criticism. Higher criticism really should be called lower criticism, because it's all of these theological arguments and theories on all kinds of things that is as much philosophy and speculation and a way to explain away many times the miracles. Lower criticism has to do with studying the text, textual criticism, which is actually the most beneficial of the two. But anyway, with higher criticism, we were in class and we came to this, and this Dr. Roberts told us how this one guy proposed that Jesus didn't really walk on the water, but he actually walked around the Sea of Galilee, and he met him the next morning and they fabricated this story, etc. And he goes through this whole theory. Well, a fellow named Billy Saul was sitting in the back of the class, and he raised his hand and he said, "Dr. Roberts, do you know where this guy is so I can get a hold of him?" And Dr. Roberts said, "No." He said, "Well, why?" Billy said, "Well, I was looking at my map and I just figured out for Jesus to get from that side of the sea to the other side and walking around, he would have had to go at 120 miles an hour to get there. So this guy has just discovered a miracle that is greater than Jesus walking across the sea." That was Billy Saul. I think as far as the miracles of the Bible are concerned, I try to recall exactly how I was able to embrace these miracles without any problem. And I think what happened is I began reading the Bible, I began reading the book of the Revelation. I don't know why I started there, but I did. There were two particular passages that really arrested my attention when I went through that. As I kept reading the Bible, I don't know that I embraced all the miracles right off, but I found more and more information that I knew was sound. And so it was like there was a point when I felt like, without trying to believe the miracles, I almost like I could give God the benefit of the doubt that this material is so solid that these things were not out of reach and unreasonable. And then I remember at one point I read the creation account. I looked at it, I remember backing up, and I just said, I believe this. I was really convinced this was a historical narrative. No one was there. And if there is a God who created all of this out of nothing, he could do it any way he wanted, on any time scale that he might choose. I think that's a lot of what happens with these miracles, is becoming persuaded that the material of how to live and what God expects, what is right, what is wrong, is valid and correct and right. I do believe this is all a gift from God, because He opens up our minds to understand the Scriptures. And while I believe that He's the one that gives us faith, we also are to grow in the faith, which means we must apply ourselves. And if there's something we run across that we don't know that we actually believe, and we just struggle with it, and I've had several things like that too. One had to do with the ascension. I'm not going to get into that here. And another one had to do with Samson, where he tied the foxes' tails together and set them and burnt down the Philistines' fields. Well, those both got resolved, but it was like I was struck through with unbelief. And rather than pretend that I was believing it when it was like, whoa, what is this? It's like the one man that came before Jesus. He brought his son to the disciples that was afflicted, demon-possessed, and he said, heal him if you can. And Jesus said, if I can, all things are possible to those who believe. And that man, rather than stiffening up, he humbled himself even more. He said, Lord, I do believe. Help me in my unbelief. If you have a hard time with Jesus walking on the water, or that the wind stopped, or there's another time where he came into the boat, it's in John, and it said as soon as he got on the boat, immediately they were on the other side where they were going. I mean, passed through time and space that quick, the whole boatload of them. If you have trouble with these things, don't pretend that you believe it. Tell God that you don't, and ask Him to help you in your unbelief. That's part of a pure heart. Pure heart means honest heart, where you're honest with God about where you're really at. So don't try to pretend, because God knows that you're pretending and you won't get anywhere. Without faith, it's impossible to please Him. We must first believe that He is, and that He's a rewarder of those who diligently seek Him. So continue to seek Him, tell Him where you're having trouble, and ask Him for assistance with that, because He wants us to walk in righteousness and in peace and in joy. How can we do that? How can we serve Him in righteousness, peace, and in joy if we're struggling with some area of unbelief? We can't. And He knows we can't. So if it's His will that we serve Him in righteousness, peace, and joy, then He will give us the information we need in order to be able to do that. Well, thank you for listening again. I always appreciate your time. I never want to waste it, because what I'm hoping that you'll always do is, and then you will